Welcome to Piecemeal, a podcast hosted by the Emily Program. Piecemeal covers topics related to eating disorders, body image, and how society may influence our thinking. Please use your discretion when listening and speak with a therapist as needed. I'm your host, Jillian Lampert. I'm super excited about our guest today. Jason is here today to share his journey navigating an eating disorder and what he'd like to see in terms of support for others. Jason wrote a fabulous blog for the Emily Program in May of 2024, I think it was, and we wanted to have him come on the podcast to talk more about his story and more about sort of a vision for the future and some really sharing that wisdom of recovery. So Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's just start a little bit with background. Like, just tell us a little bit about, when did the eating disorder start? Where were you in life then? Give us an intro.
Well, this is exciting. This is my first time speaking out really in regards to, doing a podcast and just sharing the voice out there. And it's about making a difference. And it was just calling on my heart to just truly have that voice be out there and impact lives. It's really been a big calling more recently. So born in the Midwest, and I was a competitive wrestler, and that I think was a big part of some of the foundations of weight and image and those kind of things. So that's kind of where a lot of things began earlier on in high school. And then they really kind of took place and evolved more into college. That's some stressful times. That was 7 years ago. And so it's like, well, why now? So, I recovered through the eating disorder in 2001, or 2000. So, I mean, it's been a good, 25, 26 years. So, yeah. And a lot of males may not, speak out about this as often. And so it's really important to be able to contribute and share back and save a life, help a life. And truly, I was in some really tough positions with this at a stage of my life. So it's just important to be able to give hope and give some advice and what worked and helped and impact others. So that's
That's awesome.
that's my story. I'm a dad. I have two girls, and I work in a large organization and do product model and human design work where we solve complex business problems, and I get to make an impact in the world through that side of things. So it's been a great career and a fun journey to be on. So that's a bit about myself, and very active and love sailing and activities and healthy ways. So it's exciting and been a fun journey. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And it makes me think, I don't know if you are aware of this, but the founder of the Emily Program, Dirk Miller, whose sister's name is Emily, he was a wrestler, and his eating sort of started as well in that wrestling kind of weight cutting culture. So your story certainly has a home here in our entire sort of organization history. So that's super interesting. And I love the idea of, like, recovery. I similarly have, been recovered from an eating disorder for a long time. And we always need more stories. We always need to talk about recovery and make sure that people remember it's possible, because so many people think it's not possible for them. We're actually gonna close with that question later about that sort of topic. But let's go a little bit further down the path. So this eating disorder sort of starts. How did your recovery journey evolve? Like, what was helpful for you? What was really unhelpful for you? What do you wish you had in terms of support or understanding that you just didn't have? Tell us a little bit about that.
A lot of it kind of triggered more into some college years. It started earlier on with kind of cutting weight and some of those behaviors and in life stresses, and then, just a way of, getting near term kind of satisfaction in some kind of unique way when you're really doing such hurtful damage to yourself. And so, as far as, my journey with it was, one of those that, I truly, it was a bit more lonely and just isolated in the sense that there wasn't a lot of resources. We did some talk therapy, but it wasn't like I had, a lot of forums and being a male and those kind of things, it just wasn't as talked about. And so I didn't honestly have a lot of resources to reach out, even people who could relate and be able to share stories and what worked for them, what didn't. And honestly, it was just one that I kept private for for a while, and like, oh, I'll just figure this out. And, and there was times where it just got so much that your body starts to just respond and this isn't something that's going to be sustainable. I mean, truly, it was like breakdowns of, how are we going to make it through the next day and, truly break the cycle. So, what I found as helpful was honestly looking in the mirror and just, practicing self-love and looking at yourself truly deep in your soul. Like, you have a lot to contribute, you matter, you are loved just how and who you are and how you are, no matter your size or, weight. Any of that is so outside in. And so it's truly just looking at yourself and just being like, having that compassion for where you're at and self-love. So I started to put sticky notes up and around my dorm room of literally like, you are loved. I did this exercise into the mirror daily, and then it just like, kitchen had a post-it in the door, in the cupboard. And so it was these kind of like, honestly, it was those, that is what helped me truly just like, okay, I'm going to make it through one more day. And it was just like, let's just take a day at a time and building that self-love. And at first it kind of felt like a lie when you're talking to yourself in the mirror and just doing that exercise, like you are enough, and worthy of love. And so it was really deep with that part of it for me personally. And so having that around, and then honestly there was someone else who did have some sharing, who was a male, who was a lot older, but did have an influence on my life. And just, we went into some different other ventures together, but just showing, he had addiction and in other areas, but just that was really helpful, just hearing his story and relating it. And then honestly, just kind of looking you in your soul, like, you got this and you need to make a change and you deserve this. So it's kind of like that sense of hope and just someone believing in you and encouragement. So, and what's interesting is, how that evolved, that friendship, and just to someone who gave you that sense of hope. And so that was helpful, and made it one day, then 2 days, and then I'd have setbacks, and then I'd evolve. And it was just quite a journey. But there was a real moment where I said, if I'm going to continue to do this, I don't know health wise, how that what could happen. And I was sustaining my grades and doing other things, but from a overall just mind and body standpoint, was in a tough spot. And I knew that had to change. And it was just like, today it's done. And then like, what's fascinating is that like there was build up to it, and then like there was just this like kind of God moment of just clarity, like this is no longer ever going to be anyone. So, and then just how I ate, how I looked at food, how I started to appreciate flavors, how I started to, and over time just found ways to really appreciate the food in a different way, myself in another way. And this is like still a daily practice 26 years later, each day, like, it's one day at a time. And so not today. And so things get stronger, you build that muscle.
That's fabulous. I love that. I love that sort of not today. Like it's one day at a time. Let's just take it one day at a time. It strikes me there's so many interesting pieces to your story. I wonder like what was it like to come across another male? Like I think you're really highlighting that males often feel really alone with these illnesses. Like society tends to think that males don't get these illnesses, and so as a result, there's not a lot of conversation or a lot of awareness. This conversation hopefully will help that. But what was it like to find somebody else who was a male who understood this? I imagine that was really impactful, as you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the vulnerability side of it, just him, just being able to understand like we all have different struggles, we have challenges, and relating. And then, some of the techniques that worked for him, of even the, it daily, like take it one day at a time. Sometimes it's, a few hours at a time, and just building up your time scale. And so, but it was, at the end of the day, there was a sense of just true compassion and like love that I felt of like, I care genuinely about you, and like, just someone who believing in you, and like that from another male who had such a challenge, and he ended up having a successful career in real estate. And so it was like, you would never have thought that even through such hard struggles at that time in his life. And so it just gave that glimmer of hope, and someone who could truly just support you, and you could trust that has your back. So that was what that one person impact the life forever. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so true, right? People are, a lot of times support people want to know like how they can help somebody and how they what they can do. And I think your story illustrates so clearly like being a friend or a loved one or a support is enormous, is really impactful. You don't have to do a magic thing or do a whole set of complexity, introducing into that relationship. It's really be that person's support, to be a support for that person, be a connection, be a listening ear, be a friend, a family member, whatever it is, that can very often be not even just enough. It can be incredibly impactful. How I'm really curious. So as you you get through college, things are progressing in your career and your life, and then at some point in your life, these you mentioned you have two kids. These kids show up, and now you have not only your relationship with yourself and with food and with activity in your body and everything else. What was that like? Like, how is it raising kids with that experience? Like, how did you find yourself talking to them about food or body or self-love or self-worth or any of that? I'm super curious about that.
I love that. So I have two girls, and they're 6 and 8. And so, and the 8-year-old is a competitive dancer. So this is, earlier on, it's just showering them with love. I mean, they're just little beautiful spirits that are teachers, and they chose us, and as the guides and parents, and I'm just blessed. And so it's like really, truly just giving that unconditional love and support. And I think having open conversations really of just sharing your feelings. You can cry, you can have all these different emotions, helping you regulate emotions. Like that is my mantra of like what I've been doing for them. I don't think there was areas that wasn't modeled as well, honestly. And so it's for me. And I think that attributed into how do you handle these different emotions or feelings, and even just sharing that. So, talking about that, modeling that, having support 4, 5, 6, 7, it's like, these are instrumental. So that being in competitive dance for my oldest, I mean, that's one that all body types, really important to just knowing that it's not about winning the competition. It's about loving yourself and just doing your best every day and having fun, bringing joy. It's a gift that you're able to even do this. And so that's the attitude that we're taking, and that she embraces. And so we meditate together. I'm a spiritual person, so I truly lean into, just mere exercises, meditating, gratitude book, journal of like what she was grateful for. And so, it's things like that that just make you more aware. And by me getting to model and do that with them, like they get to support, and we eat healthy, balanced meals, and we also eat not healthy meals. And so it's like a variety is okay. So, moderation, balance, and just appreciating different flavors, too, right? And looking at food is like fun. They cook with me, we, grill, we experience food and have more joy with it. And so, but really important that, that they realize and share their feelings, have love, and even the harder feelings of other kids or pressures that they get. I mean, these are all things that then we talk about. It's just an open, safe place to discuss, and get to be their guide. And
It sounds beautiful. It sounds amazing. Your kids are lucky to have you, lucky to have chosen you to be the parent. And I love the ideas of, we talk a lot about balance and moderation and joy and connection. And there's so many messages about what food shouldn't be or should be, or good foods or bad foods. And it turns out that that is all very unhelpful to people to categorize that way, right? And so I love what you're thinking, what you're giving voice to around, connecting with your feelings and being able to manage the tough feelings, because we're all going to have tough feelings. And how do you manage them, and how do you, it sounds like you're teaching your kids how to sort of fill that well of love for themselves and connection with others to continue to feel like they have a strong place in the world, and that they have a web of support within themselves and outside of themselves. It sounds lovely, really. So way to go. Good job, Dad.
I'm grateful. You learn a lot as you need to had different upbringings and didn't have certain areas, and so it's still every day doing my best and learning and leaning into resources and sharing with others. So it's these are good important steps forward, and yeah,
Yeah, they are.
that
There's
self-love tank early pays dividends later. So like this is really important. And
I love that. I love that. Fill up that self-love tank early. I love that. How, when you think through, over the past 25 years or so, I imagine you've had, some bumpy things happen in your life, as we all do, but like, how have you kind of really dug into what's helpful for you in those tougher times, so that the, eating sort of didn't try to come back as a way to distract from those emotions or that difficulty? Like, what have you found was helpful for you?
Yeah, that's great. At different times, because this hasn't been all, unicorns and rainbows. So, I mean, you get real life struggles, real challenges. So, different things really helped. Healthy exercise was always important, and, being able to clear your mind and, being able to do that in a healthy way. Like, over time, like, allowing yourself to just be too. We are human beings and you can just like go, 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 but it's like just allowing yourself to be, and you don't have to. So what was interesting is I went into like, I was a soccer player as well. So I ran a lot and then I run and then I was timing it. And it's like, oh, I got to always beat my time and I got to be faster. And it's like, for who? Like, I mean, really, if you think about it, it's like we're our own hardest coach. And so it's like, my gosh. So, some of those things you reflect on and over time is like, you know, I really don't have to always beat something or be so competitive. And so a lot of over time, I've really unwound that competitive side and nature of just being more at peace. And you still want to strive for growth and contributing, but you don't have to go with such a hard edge or expectations for yourself with it. Um, went through significant life challenges of, my best friend being lost with cancer, or it's like I've been through so many. I've had, my life in front of me as a scuba diver where, I've had very close calls a number of times. And the fact that I'm here and able to contribute is actually a reason why I'm doing this. So, but those harder times emotionally, meditation, I found spirituality through a beautiful, amazing guide in my life and have mentors. So, finding mentors, support system to lean on, and so different stages of hard times, it takes the digging in, and you made a commitment to yourself one day at a time, not today. So it's just you go back to that commitment and mantra you made, and just so it's yeah, so those are the hardest times. I mean, those are the times to reach out. Those are the times to have compassion for yourself and just being like, okay, this is a process. And this is, stay committed to it. And so yeah, it's just different tools, different ways, guides, books, like I mean, there's just resources. There's so many resources, right? And so a lot of times I was talking to friends and people who I could trust of like, hey, there's a hard time. And even just talking about the emotions out, like help you navigate that. Having, being in therapy, it's like, oh, I had support system and guides who are like, here's some good ways to work through these bigger emotions. And, dealing with significant loss at younger ages in my mid 20s, I mean, these were big emotional things. So it's just working through those in healthy ways and support, not going back to other coping mechanisms, and then ensuring you're clear of not transferring to something else is a really important thing. Like, oh, like the running, like that could become a whole nother exercise addiction. But now I'm just running constantly to beat my time. And I'm like, oh, this, I just, went from one thing to the other. So now it's like, so just being aware of like, okay, and then so when I had compassion for that, yeah, like just being really aware of those over time, all the time. Reach out, keep your voice heard and sharing the feelings. That's why my 6-year-olds are learning how to do this.
That's incredible. That is just full of wisdom. I'm curious as it relates sort of specifically to males. Like imagine you're in college right now, you're in your dorm, you're struggling. What would you hope for anybody with an eating disorder, but particularly males, because we know that oftentimes males still feel kind of unseen or unheard in terms of eating disorders. Like what would you like to see for that person in their dorm room right now?
I would like for them to see themselves and their truth, you know, and then that's what it's about. At the end of the day, others will help. I'd love to see it, certainly reach out, certainly talk to just one person who feels like a safe space. Like, you just one person who's like, hi, everyone has their stuff, everyone thinks as these, everyone has their thing. So like you'll be so surprised that you just voice your thoughts out of something you're struggling with, an emotion, a time of this, and how many people have struggled with that and were competitive in sports or had other addictions in other ways. And so, and at the end of the day, looking at your own self and knowing that you are loved, you are enough. That's why we're here. And so, believing in that, seeing that, and doing that exercise daily and building that, well, that self-love. That's what I'd like to see in the dorm. It's another version of yourself. Just asking yourself, what do you aspire to be? What goals do you have? And having compassion for that. All the different body types and been through significant hardships and pressures. And so, but what do we want to have? More peace, more joy, more connectedness. Like, so just kind of listing out and putting, if that's a little visual thing or a way to articulate something aspirational, like have that little vision board or have, that goal and that in mind. And but doing little small exercises, like, little small things add up. And so, being aware of our mind and how um how that can serve us and how it can be a real challenge. And so you can create new patterns in the mind. All the studies show this. And so this is negative self-talk and the damaging, we can create new pathways. And so you just building that strength up. It's just like an exercise or how you achieve other things in your life that you didn't think were possible, right? Imagine doing that in this area. That so
Well, that's you sort of almost answered, but I know you're going to have more to say. We asked this last question of everybody because a lot of times people say they hear a recovery story and they think like that's amazing, that sounds wonderful, that's great, but that's not possible for me. So, what would you say to that person who might be listening, thinking like, "Wow, Jason, that's cool, that's an amazing story, but I'm not sure that that's possible for me." What would you say to that person?
I have compassion for that and I understand it because I am you. I went through that. I was in that chair where I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know that could be the next day. So we we tell ourselves these things that unfortunately are limiting beliefs. And so that's a limiting belief. We tell ourselves these lies and limiting beliefs that are comforting and they keep us in that place. And so number one would be catch that and replace it with an empowering belief that, it is possible even if it feels like a lie, like it is possible. I have the possibility to no longer have this be a part of my life, and achieve and have, more connection and more peace, more calm. And then what steps are you going to take for that? With so little ones, but you start with catching the lie, in this pattern, because it comes up and it's there. And so, but I was in that chair and in that space, and it just, I I have compassion for it, and it's have grace for yourself. Just one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, and just keep repeating it. And it'll eventually sink in and it'll touch you and it's there. Like it's just waiting.
Excellent. Thank you for that. It's really full of hope and really full of reminder of small steps. It doesn't have to all get better at once. It's not going to all have to get better tomorrow. It can get a little tiny bit different every step. That's incredible. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom. Like, I feel like it's just a sort of this peace I feel just listening to you, and I can sort of see that in your story. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
I'm so grateful. And, if I can just even impact one life, it makes that much more worthwhile of all the pain and the work I went through. So anyone can reach out and take next steps. And I'm looking forward to how I can support.
Great. Thank you so much. And if you want to connect with Jason, if you're listening to this, you'll be able to check out the show notes to find out how to find him. If you enjoyed today's episode of Piecemeal, please subscribe, rate, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Learn more about us at the Emily Program or find the Emily Program on social media. Piecemeal is produced by the amazing podcast team at the Emily Program. Until next time, take care. Thanks for listening.